Hidden behind bulletproof glass, guarded by a mysterious order of knights. Could this stone cup really be the legendary Holy Grail? And the horrific, mythical monster, half man, half bull, that devoured its human victims, trapped inside a terrifying labyrinth. But could the blood-curdling myth of the Minotaur be linked to a real place? This is the Santo Cáliz, or Cup of Christ, kept at Valencia Cathedral. Kept under tight security, Easter is one of the few times when the revered relic is exposed to public view. It's guarded by an ordained order of knights. Who have sworn to protect the cup with their lives. The chalice is one of the many relics around the world claimed to be the Holy Grail, the cup that Jesus drank from at the Last Supper. It's an intriguing romance that's captivated the imagination of the devout and diabolical alike. Relics have brought power and prestige over the ages. Adolf Hitler and his henchmen were keen to secure such icons to bolster the myth of Nazi invincibility.
Himmler and Hitler and his occult staff wanted to collect icons, religious relics that would give them powers.
Holy relics are often surrounded by claims of miracles or mischief. In the case of the Santo Cáliz, a priest is said to have died after dropping the sacred cup in 1744. Experts have determined that the ornate base of the chalice is medieval. It's the cracked agate stone cup on top which is believed to be the actual cup that Jesus drank from at the Last Supper. Writer Janice Bennett has come to Valencia to investigate the intriguing Santo Cáliz. The sacred cup is mentioned in a precious manuscript, preserved in the Valencia University Library.
Okay, so this is a translation of an original Latin document from the 6th century. It relates how under the Emperor Valerian in 258, the Pope was forced to give up the possessions of the church.
According to the manuscript, one of those possessions was the cup used by Jesus at the Last Supper. Some believe it was originally brought from Jerusalem to Rome by St. Peter, where it was protected by successive popes. The manuscript says it was St. Lawrence who saved the Holy Grail from the thieving hands of Imperial Rome, sending it to Spain.
El cáliz en que Cristo nuestro bien y maestro consagró su preciosa sangre la noche de la cena. He turned over some memorable relics so that he could send them to Spain, and among them was the cup in which Christ, our good and master, consecrated his precious blood the night of the Last Supper.
This tiny manuscript claims the Holy Grail was brought to Spain in the 3rd century. If so, could the Valencia chalice be that sacred cup? It would have to match the kinds of materials and styles used to make first-century crockery in Jerusalem. The investigation moves to the Holy Land. Archaeologist Professor Shimon Gibson has made some of the most important archaeological finds in Jerusalem. Having lived and worked in the ancient city for 35 years, he's built a detailed picture of first-century Jerusalem, based on archaeological evidence. Relics were often faked by churches to get money from pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land. Will the Valencia chalice stand up to archaeological scrutiny?
I can see that there's a separation which can be made between the cup which is on top of this stand and the lower part.
The lower part of the chalice is known to have been made in the medieval period.
But the bowl itself does look quite Roman in style. These kind of spherical bowls with a line which is immediately below the rim, these wide, flared, flat bases are very typical of chalk vessels that we know of from the first century, from the time of Jesus in Jerusalem.
In the pictures of the Last Supper, the Grail is usually depicted as made from precious metal, sometimes wood. But the Valencia chalice is made of stone. A recent discovery suggests that stone may indeed be the more likely material for a ceremonial cup. This is the only complete ritual cup with an incantation or prayer carved into it, to have been discovered in Jerusalem from the times of Christ.
It was quite amazing that when this cup was found, we could see on the sides an inscription, Adonai Shavti, which means, Lord, I have returned or have come.
According to Professor Gibson, a stone vessel may well have been used for a religious ritual or feast.
In the first century, there was a fashion of making stone vessels, and the reason for that is because purity was a great concern to people at that time, especially in Jerusalem, which, after all, was the city of God. Stone, of course, was a natural material, unlike glass or pottery, which is manufactured. It's a unique find. It's amazing to find it in excavations.
The Valencia chalice looks nothing like the Jerusalem cup, but it does resemble other stone cups from that period. But can Professor Gibson find anything in the style of the Valencia chalice?
And here we have a bowl which is very similar, actually, to the agate one. It's spherical and it has a groove just below the rim. So that's a good parallel for the agate bowl.
The Valencia chalice is made from agate. The next challenge is to find a source of the precious stone in Jerusalem. The search takes him to one of the city's oldest markets.
في الأجيت من المسار في الأجيت من المسار من الأجيت
حجر أربستر
لا أربستر أجيت
عقاد
أيوة في Yeah, it's a bead made of agate. But yes, these are sort of semi-precious stones and something you'd expect to find in this area. Shukran. Masalama.
The market's nearest source of agate is Egypt, also a likely source in ancient times when Jerusalem was a bustling trading center. But agate is a semi-precious stone. It's unclear what Jesus and the apostles would have been doing with such a valuable cup.
what many people don't realize, and that is that Jesus rented a room in Jerusalem for the Last Supper. Hence, it seems reasonable that the bowls and other implements which are being used for the Last Supper would have been owned by the person who owned the building in which the Last Supper took place. Clearly, an agate bowl could have been used as part of the dinner set of that period.
It comes down to faith. It's impossible to prove one way or the other whether this chalice was the actual cup used by Christ. Meanwhile, a writer's quest to find out more about this mysterious cup has led from the Middle East to the sinister shadow of Nazi Germany. Hitler was obsessed by the idea of the Grail and the power and status surrounding such mythical relics. Senior Nazis believed the Grail was hidden in Spain, and that clues to its whereabouts were hidden in one of Hitler's favorite Wagnerian operas, Parsifal. Wagner based this opera on a 13th century Grail legend. According to the tale, the Grail was kept in a castle called Montsalvat, which Wagner translated as Montsalvat. SS chief Heinrich Himmler visited the monastery of Montserrat in the belief that it could have been the Montsalvat featured in Wagner's musical.
Himmler came to Montserrat in 1940 because he was searching for the Holy Grail. Hitler believed there was a blood connection between the Germans and Jesus Christ. He wanted to start a new religion based on this idea that the Germans were Aryans, a superior race. He believed that the Holy Grail would give him supernatural powers and the ability to win the war.
Although it's only one account of the Grail's many alleged locations, Hitler believed the Parsifal legend would lead him to the cup. Needless to say, his Reichsfuhrer Heinrich Himmler never did find the Grail. Michael Hesseman has published many books on holy relics and also believes that clues can be found in the Parsifal story.
Michael, I understand that Himmler came to Spain in 1940 looking for the Holy Grail.
Oh, he did. He had a team of occultists in the SS, an own office for it. In the Parsifal by Wolfram von Eschenbach, the earliest German language description of the Holy Grail, the castle of the Grail is called Montsalvat. Because Montserrat sounds a little bit similar, he believed that the Holy Grail is there, but it was not.
Based on this source, Hesseman believes the Nazis were looking at the wrong monastery. He has another idea as to where it may have been kept.
Actually, my research, I found the real Montsalvat. And indeed, it says, and you can see it here, it says that the name of the Grail castle was Montsalvat. There is a mountain which is called Mont Salvatoris in Latin, or in the language which was spoken in the Pyrenees region in the 12th century, Montsalvat.
In one story, Parsifal describes the Grail not as a cup, but as a stone. Hesseman believes this may be a reference to the stone of the Valencia chalice.
So what are the clues in Parsifal that would indicate that this monastery was the castle of the Holy Grail?
Generally, Parsifal, Wolfram von Eschenbach says that there are many hermitages around the castle of the Holy Grail. You find a rock face, and it is just in front of the rock face. And in a small chapel, the relic of the Holy Grail was normally kept. The procession walked up the stairs and went to the church. The Muslim brother of Parsifal, he was baptized, and he was baptized from living water, what means flowing water. You don't have it normally in a church. So the Parsifal turns out to be something like a treasure map, and if you follow all the topographical information and geographical information given there, you can find it.
Countless books have been written about the Grail. About to produce another one, author Janice Bennett's research is taking her to the mountainous region of the Spanish Pyrenees. She's following the clues that Hesseman believes are hidden within the original German Grail legend. She's heading for Mont Salvatoris, and there's another tantalizing link to this place in the Pyrenees. It's also the location of a monastery where the Valencia chalice is said to have been kept in medieval times. But according to the legend of Parsifal, Janice should be looking for a place called Montsalvache. Michael Hesseman believes that in the Middle Ages this mountain was known as Mont Salvage, a remarkably similar sounding name to the Grail castle in the Parsifal legend. The writer wants to find out whether local people still recognize the ancient name.
Hola. Estoy buscando Mont Salvage.
Mont Salvage.
Mont Salvage en una montaña.
Por Salvage no.
Gracias.
De nada, hasta luego.
Adiós.
She said that she's never heard of Mont Salvage, but there's a mountain very close to here called San Salvador. ¿Han oído de Mont Salvage? Mont Salvage. No? ¿Han oído de Mont Salvage? No, gracias.
No one seems to recognize the ancient name of Mont Salvage until a visit to the town museum leads to a breakthrough.
Señor, estoy buscando Mont Salvage. De la Edad Media, ¿lo conoce?
Mont Salvage.
Mont Salvage.
Puede que sí, se le llamaba así a San Salvador.
Ah.
Antes, antiguamente, en el siglo XII, en época de Alfonso I,
Sí.
en occitano se le llamaba a San Salvador Mont Salvage.
Ah, muchas gracias. When I mentioned the German word Mont Salvage, he understood it immediately as Mont Salvage from the local dialect of the 12th century.
The author heads out in search of what Hesseman believes was the Grail's home. A local medieval monastery, San Juan de la Peña, with notes from Michael Hesseman's reading of the Parsifal manuscript.
The Grail Castle was located in a wild, rocky, mountainous, forested area. This really seems to be the right location for that.
Hesseman claims the Parsifal legend also mentions there being many hermitages or small chapels surrounding the Grail castle.
Oh. This was one of the clues that Michael gave me, that the Grail castle was surrounded by them.
Hesseman's notes on Parsifal describe the place where the Grail was kept as in front of a rock face.
Wow, it's amazing. What a magnificent sight.
If it is the castle described in the Parsifal legend, this medieval monastery could have hid the Holy Grail. There's a lot of ifs, but in any case, it's all good material for another book on the mythical Holy Grail. Can the caretaker provide the writer with any more tantalizing details?
Eso puede ser la iglesia prerrománica, la iglesia mozárabe. Está en la parte de abajo.
Ah, muy interesante. Muy interesante. ¿Podemos verla?
Sí, claro. Vamos.
Another of the supposed clues in the Parsifal story is that processions brought the Grail up some steps from its hiding place. Sure enough, there's a set of stairs.
De principios del siglo X.
This is incredible. This chapel has exactly what Parsifal said it did.
The Parsifal legend also mentions water used to baptize his brother. Once again, a feature in the old building seems to suggest a link for those who want or need to believe.
You can see on the wall here where the water flowed from a spring in the rock above, and it went down below. It's really amazing. It's just incredible. I never knew that all this was here. Perfect hiding place for the Grail. Absolutely amazing, incredible.
For a writer hunting for a good tale, the monastery has compelling similarities to clues gleaned from the Parsifal legend. The legend says he climbed a stairwell and witnessed a procession carrying the Grail through a door. The caretaker shows the author a bricked-up portal leading to a chapel below. For her, it completes a vivid, potentially best-selling picture.
Claro. So the old stairway was right here. This is where the monks would carry the Grail to be worshipped by the faithful. The altars are there. The Grail would have been placed in that area.
It could add up to evidence that the Valencia chalice was once kept here, or it could all be a big coincidence.
This is the place where the faithful would have come to venerate the Grail, right here.
For a writer tackling a subject covered by countless others before her, the clues all add up to a compelling new angle on a classic story.
From all the evidence I've seen, the archaeological evidence, the story of St. Lawrence, the story of how it was preserved in monasteries, how people risked their lives to save this cup, the mention in Parsifal, everything. I believe this is the cup that Jesus used at the Last Supper to consecrate his blood.
But there is no archaeological proof that even Jesus himself ever existed, let alone the cup he's said to have used at the Last Supper. But for believers and writers, the legend of the Holy Grail still provides a rich seam of romance to plunder. A terrifying monster, half man, half bull. According to ancient myth, the Minotaur was imprisoned inside a labyrinth where hapless human victims were sacrificed.
This was a place of absolute bloodthirsty horror.
But could the blood-curdling story be linked to a real place?
It looks as if there's been a recent ritual.
This is the tale of a horrifying myth and a real-life, mysterious maze. According to classical myth, Poseidon, the god of the oceans, became angry with ancient Crete's disrespectful ruler, King Minos. He caused his wife to lust after a savage bull as a punishment. The grotesque offspring of their unnatural union was the Minotaur, or the Bull of Minos.
King Minos' wife, Pasiphae, this rather beautiful woman, had an insatiable sexual appetite to the extent where she fell in love with a bull. The product that came out of this had to be hidden away from public view. And so that's why he had Daedalus construct this whole labyrinth.
According to the legend, the labyrinth was so ingeniously crafted that once in, no man could find his way out. The story also says that human sacrifices, including innocent children, were sent inside, only to be devoured by the Minotaur. The beast was ultimately slayed by the hero Theseus, who found his way out of the labyrinth with the help of a guiding thread.
What the ancient Greeks remembered about the labyrinth was really a horrible place. It was a place of absolute bloodthirsty horror.
Some classical myths are based on a kernel of truth, while gods and monsters are a matter of faith. Could the tale of Theseus and the Minotaur be traced back to an actual labyrinth that existed in antiquity? Fascinated by the legend of the Minotaur, Oxford University geography expert Nick Howarth is on a quest to investigate a physical link to the labyrinth of the classical Greek myth. His quest starts in a library holding a large and valuable collection of early maps. Among thousands of ancient documents is a map which he believes may hold a clue to the legendary labyrinth of King Minos.
What we have here is a 16th century map of Crete. This map clearly shows a labyrinth motif exists here in the south of the island. This symbol jumped off the page. It was something that I really wanted to investigate further, and from that point on I made it I guess my purpose to work out whether or not this thing was just a piece of ornamentation, or was there really something else behind this very definitive symbol.
The strange symbol on the 16th century map is unusual. It appears to point to a spot on the outskirts of the modern village of Gortin. Whatever the symbol represents, Nick believes he will find it there. His quest will take him back to a region he knows well, the island of Crete.
Some people have told me that to search for myths in the landscape is wrong, that these myths are just stories, that they're not real. The myths are probably the most powerful stories we have.
Ancient myths can represent intriguing riddles. Like the legendary thread said to have saved Theseus, these classical stories can contain a trail of clues that lead to exciting discoveries. Nick begins his search at the most famous ancient Minoan site on Crete. Knossos, the legendary palace of King Minos himself. When Knossos was excavated under the explorer Sir Arthur Evans in 1900, he uncovered a series of depictions of bulls. They include a fascinating image of a man leaping over the horns of a charging beast. It's similar to figures found on other ancient sites. The deadly sport of bull leaping is still practiced in countries like Spain. It's believed that this was once a magical or religious ritual linked to a worship of bulls. At Knossos, Evans also found a Bronze Age stadium where such rituals are believed to have been performed. The bull seems to have held a special significance to the ancient Minoans. But what about the labyrinth? The word comes from the Greek labyris, meaning double-edged axe. When Sir Arthur Evans originally excavated Knossos, he found numerous ceremonial double-headed axes. Symbols apparently depicting such axes were also found etched on the walls. The mythical labyrinth has been associated with Knossos ever since.
I can remember coming here as a child and hearing the myths of the labyrinth and being amazed. It captured My imagination left an impression on me for the rest of my life.
More than 1 million people come to Knossos every year. It's become famous as the possible site of the labyrinth that inspired the Minotaur myth. The remains at Knossos show that this was once a complex structure, with numerous interlacing corridors and rooms. But was it a labyrinth? Nick has arranged to meet archaeologist Professor Sandy McGillivray, an acclaimed authority on Knossos.
Being a student at university, I learnt that not all is as it seems here at Palace at Knossos. Do you think that we can say that this is the labyrinth, or is it a labyrinth?
I think it's nothing of the sort. Arthur Evans was digging for mythology. Because Evans was looking for minotaurs and labyrinths, everything was interpreted through that lens. So in fact, what he called the horns of consecration was a very well-known symbol for the horizon in ancient Egypt, and that is probably what it meant to the Minoans as well. But because Evans was looking for minotaurs, it became a bull's head. All the interpretation and what they find has a lot to do with what they were looking for when they got there.
The professor believes that there were labyrinths in ancient times used for some kind of ritual ceremonies.
We know that in the Roman period, people were still coming to Crete to be initiated into the cult of Dictaean Zeus, the Cretan-born Zeus. And the labyrinth was a place where you went and you experienced something that transformed you.
But were these ritual labyrinths natural rather than man-made structures?
Crete has a lot of caves. I can't remember the last count, 500 of natural caves, many of which were visited in antiquity. So there are buildings that are labyrinths. There are also places that are labyrinths. So in fact, you could have done such a thing, gone through such a process in a building like Knossos, or you could have gone through it in the caves.
The professor believes caves may have been used as labyrinths. The island of Crete is riddled with them. Nick has contacted a group of cave explorers who've directed him to a town east of Knossos. The cave complex at Skotino is one of the largest on the island and was used for religious rituals in ancient times. Even for experienced cavers, entering this cave complex is dangerous. Fortunately for Nick, he has 2 experienced guides.
Yes, Kanate. Yes, thanks. It's good to be here.
Excellent. It should be good.
How far do we descend down?
I would say about 20-25 meters vertical.
The entrance to the Skotino caves is concealed in a hollow. As Nick gets nearer, he sees a forbidding hole. From the entrance, a great steep tunnel of jagged rocks leads down into the earth. At the end of the tunnel, there is another, steeper drop. Nick and his guides work their way into a second tunnel, a narrow crevasse. As they make their way slowly into the mountain among the rocks, they come across a fragment of pottery.
This pottery is a little bit burnt.
Oh, yeah.
You see?
Yeah. This is possibly a Minoan pot fragment that could have been used in some sort of votive offering, as we know from the amount of ashes found here that things were thrown into the fire as part of the ceremony.
The crevasse opens up into a great cave, and then another drop further into the earth. The Skotino caves are daunting, dark, and treacherous. According to local legend, this is where the story of the Minotaur was born. Perhaps mysterious ancient rituals performed within these caves inspired such terrifying tales.
We're going to descend down around 6 to 7 meters.
All right. We're descending now into the sort of most sacred levels of the Skotna cave.
The honeycomb of twisted shafts and tunnels is confusing. Tight passages link one cave to another in a seemingly endless subterranean maze.
About 160 meters into the depth. And now we're about to enter the last chamber. You can really see why it would have impressed them coming into a place like this. But probably only the high priestesses would have been allowed access into this deepest grotto of the cave. So this is very sacred ground that we're standing on now.
As they reach the heart of the cave complex, they come upon an ancient altar cut from the rock. Spookily, it seems as if the altar is still in use.
This is amazing. It looks as if there's been some sort of recent ritual, if you judge by these feathers.
It looks like an animal sacrifice.
Have you heard of this happening before in these sorts
To
of...
be honest with you, no. It's the first time I see it. I don't know. I'm surprised.
A ritual sacrifice in the heart of a complex of tunnels is a bizarre echo of the Minotaur myth.
What we can say is, I think that there's something fundamental about spirituality about this place, which is a focal point for worship. Even today, there's a church above the ground, which shows the power of this place in the landscape.
But something doesn't quite fit with the myth of a man-made maze.
Manos, do you think man has had any role shaping this cavern?
Not really. I don't think so, not really. It's all formed naturally. It takes a stalagmite to evolve about a centimeter every 100 years.
All right.
So it's all natural.
So these would be tens of thousands of years.
Yes, of course.
According to the myth, the labyrinth was designed by the architect and magician, Daedalus. Although the natural winding passages of Skotino are imposing, Nick believes there are even more compelling examples of labyrinths to be found elsewhere. A quest is on to find a real place that may be linked to the terrifying myth of the Minotaur. A strange symbol on a 500-year-old map marks a spot east of Heraklion, the capital of Crete. Geography expert Nick Howarth has been to Gortin before, where an underground system of passageways emerges from under the earth. Swiss caver Thomas Waldmann is one of the few people to have explored the underground complex. But this time the entrance is sealed off. A couple of soldiers soon appear. Word seems to have spread of the visitors' interest in the Gortin complex. Unable to access the tunnels, Nick is forced to rely on the caver's account of what it's like down there.
What do people see when they come and visit the labyrinth?
Some said this is the labyrinth of the mythology, and some said, no, this is not the labyrinth of the mythology, so you have both opinions.
What do you think?
If you go inside, it's really labyrinthine, that's true. You have many branchings, rooms, and when I went the first time inside, I also took a string with me because I did not know what is expecting me. No, and most of people go just inside once, and then they take a string.
So you think they're actually doing it so they don't lose their way, like Theseus?
If you go in the first time, you don't know it. It's for security, I think it's prudent.
According to the Swiss caver, the Gortin complex does form an ancient labyrinth. It's believed to date back to Roman times and also features on a 500-year-old Dutch map marked with a unique symbol of a labyrinth. A map of the Gortin complex was also made, apparently by the French, more than 200 years ago. Video made by cavers who managed to get in.
Crawl down into the labyrinth cave is incredibly narrow and tight. To get in, you must squirm your way through a narrow opening and then down past an iron gate.
A tunnel leads into the main body of the complex and the first of many junctions. Both directions lead to other tunnels that split into one or more others. The structures seem at least in part to be man-made, with numerous right angles and chiseled surfaces. The roof appears to have collapsed in some places. In other parts, the ceilings have large fissures and cracks. These cavers managed to explore 2.5 kilometers of corridors and chambers. The layout is highly complex, as if deliberately designed to confuse and disorientate. The tunnels frequently split, leading to dead ends and circles that lead the explorers back where they started. And it's big. The area explored so far covers a staggering 9,000 square meters.
Here you can see columns around the room, which give the impression of branching passageways, which is where I think some of the first ideas of the mythology became attached to the site.
Signs on the walls betray the presence of earlier visitors, including the name of Dumas, the French spy who produced one of the only maps of the complex, and swastikas. The Nazis used the tunnels to store ammunition during the Second World War. While occupying Crete, the Germans used the Gortin tunnels to store tons of high explosives and ammunition. Before they left, many tunnels were demolished. Whatever secrets lay hidden among them remain buried underground. What began with a mysterious symbol on a 500-year-old map has ended with blocked access to the bizarre tunnel complex of Gortin. Did its underground maze inspire the legend of Theseus and the marauding Minotaur? Tantalizingly, the answer lies just out of reach.